Okay, so good morning to everybody, or at least to our friends in US. Thank you, Rafael, for hosting this webinar. And thank you also because I know that it's very early for you. It's 7 in the morning, so very, very early. Luckily for us, it's afternoon, so it's easier for us. Anyway, today we'll speak about mini Mapathons, and you will see in a moment what we mean when we speak about mini Mapathons. This is an initiative that is developed within the Geo4All webinars. This is Geo4All webinars is a series of webinars that is managed and offered by University of Colorado, Denver, specifically Rafael Moreno, that I want to thank for this very great and important commitment. Okay, we start with the mini Mapathons. Mini Mapathons are humanitarian Mapathons for children. And I want just to introduce the webinar, presenting the people that are involved. So the authors of these webinars is myself, Maria Brovelli, Tyler Redford, who is from HOT, Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, Marco Minghini, who is from Politecnico di Milano, and Aldo Torrebruno, Politecnico di Milano as well. A very short presentation about me. I'm professor of GIS at Politecnico di Milano. I'm also the director of one of the camps of Politecnico di Milano. I'm co-chair of 2 networks in the Geo4All initiative, the European one, and also the Geo-crowdsourcing citizen science. Then I have also other involvement. I'm a member of OSGEO, charter member of OSGEO. I'm involved in the International Society of Photogrammetry Remote Sensing in GEO, specifically for the land coverage assessment, and in the United Nations DGIM Italy, United Nations Open Geo Initiative, and in the Italian Association. And then I'm very proud to say that I was awarded last year with the Soul Cats Award. That is the most important award of the OSGEO Foundation. Tyler is a very young person, but you see how important he is. He's the executive director of the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. He's leading a team of 23 and more than 8,000 volunteers working all over the world. And he is leading the major ICT and disaster relief recovery programs across the sectors within the United Nations, American Red Cross, private sector, and so on. And is also involved in teaching and engaging young people at the HOT activities. The second one who will speak about these mini Mapathons is Aldo Torrebruno. Is not a scientist, or only partially, because he graduated before in philosophy and then also in education technology. And he works in a lab here in Politecnico di Milano, where they're interested in e-learning and using technology for teaching to students. He's expert in technology in classes, but this is just for the professional point of view, because then, as you can see in the picture, he loves his dog a lot, Uran, and you can find a lot of pictures of Uran also on Facebook, and he's also a compulsive reader. The last person that is involved is Marco Minghini. Marco Minghini is also working at Polytechnic of Milan, but he's a geomatic engineer. Currently, he's a research fellow at the GeoLab, where he is also the responsible of the GIS sector. His activities are related to volunteer geographic information, citizen science, OpenStreetMap, geovisualization, and every of them using free and open source technology. He is also involved in many activities as GeoCharter member, Geo4All responsible for the GeoLab, OpenStreetMap contributor, hot volunteer, Mapathon organizer, and so on and so on. And then this is also was a soccer goalkeeper. And he likes sport, traveling, reading, and of course, coding. Okay, so those are the actors of this webinar. And before going to the description of the mini Mapathons, I want to tell you that this topic of mini Mapathons can be framed within the network of geo-crowdsourcing citizen science. I put here the link or to the wiki page where you can find all pieces of information about this network within the labs of Geo4All. The main themes that are faced in these labs, in this network, are the volunteer geographic information, VGI, but also the passive ambient involuntary geographic information, what is sometimes called the geo-crowdsourcing, and the citizen science. What we want to present in this webinar, we want to present how it is possible to give birth to Mapathons, mini Mapathons. For doing that, first of all, we have a presentation about Humanitarian OpenStreetMap and the sisters organization given by Tyler. Then we have a second part of presentation with the educational aspect in mini Mapathons presented by Aldo. And then the third part with the technical aspect in mini Mapathons in such a way that at the end you also will be able to give birth to these mini Mapathons. And then we conclude with questions and answers. But then the very, very last point, I ask you to start thinking about the possibility of organizing mini Mapathons in your country with some contacts with schools, because if it is possible and if there are people interested, what we want to do is to try to organize next year's, having 1 year behind us, in front of us, we want to organize a very big mini Mapathon, international, worldwide mini Mapathon with all schools together, 1 day next year. That can be, for instance, the Earth Day, so the 22 of April, or better, probably 21, 20, because 22 is a Saturday or Sunday, so people, the children are not at school. So our aim is to start working collaboratively with respect to this one, trying to involve all the labs of the Geo4All network in such a way to arrive at this very, very big event next year. Okay, thank you. And now I give the word to Tyler.
Okay, Maria, thank you very much. How's my audio? Can everyone hear me okay?
Okay, it's okay.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen now. Okay, how does that look?
Yes, we stopped.
Yes, it should be sharing now. Yeah, it tells me it's sharing. Okay, wonderful. Let me just move things around a little bit. Okay, great. So thanks again, Maria. So I'd like to say welcome to everyone on the call. My name is Tyler Radford. I'm the Executive Director of Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. I think most of you on the call today we're really fortunate on our side because you already know what OpenStreetMap is, and you're already familiar with some of the work that we do. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our organization, how we work with OpenStreetMap and promote OpenStreetMap, and also what is a Mapathon and what does it mean to do a humanitarian Mapathon for children. So I'd like to start with one visual. And this is from a tool we've recently developed, which depicts what you're seeing here is essentially the road density in OpenStreetMap. And you can see based on this that huge areas of the developing world have now been mapped. And I'm going to switch over. This is now building density that you're looking at. So you can see a lot of work's been done, but there's still huge areas in Latin America, in the Caribbean, in Africa, in Asia, that have simply not been mapped or are not available in a publicly accessible location like OpenStreetMap. So there's an incredible amount of work left to do. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're helping solve that problem. So one of the main things, main activities that HOT undertakes is we work to train and mobilize volunteers around how they can use OpenStreetMap to map the places they live. And these volunteers then go on to hold what we call mapathons and mapping events in their local towns, villages, cities, and countries, working to map the places they live in OpenStreetMap from their homes, schools, and offices. And we also encourage people to get outside, get out of the building and actually map on the ground. And so this is a photo of some of our team members in Indonesia actually walking the streets and recording what they see on paper and using GPS devices, and that information then later gets input into OpenStreetMap and becomes part of the global map. So just taking a step back and thinking about how far we've come, OpenStreetMap now has 2.5 million volunteers around the world. And these photos are depict some of our volunteers. So these are HOT volunteers from the top left, working to hold a mapping event in Tanzania to map Dar es Salaam. The top right is also Tanzania. The bottom left is mapping in Indonesia. And the bottom right is what we call a Mapathons right here in the United States. So these are groups of people who are coming together, looking at satellite imagery and then tracing that imagery into OpenStreetMap to create better maps in OpenStreetMap. I think most of you will have seen this already, but if you haven't, this is our tasking manager. So we use this software to help collaborate and help multiple volunteers work together at the same time on a mapping project. So what we can do is set up what we call a project in Tasking Manager, and it sort of focuses in on a specific area of interest. And each volunteer can select a square, and that they're assigned to that square and responsible for mapping everything they see in that square. And once it's done, they mark it as complete and it turns yellow. And then a second volunteer takes another pass at reviewing the work, and it becomes green once it's been validated. And so we've used this approach to respond to a number of disasters throughout the world, where volunteers come together in the immediate hours and days after a disaster to help map. So this is Guekedu. This is a city in southern Guinea where some of the first Ebola cases were detected in 2014. This is what the city looked like in OpenStreetMap on March 26th, 2014. And on the right side of my screen here, you're seeing what it looked like 5 days later. So you can see the incredible amount of detail that had been filled in by 244 volunteers around the world holding mapathons and mapping events. So what I want to get across with this presentation is that volunteers coming together and remotely or even in the place that they live can be really powerful, and a small number of volunteers can have a huge impact on the global map, which is then useful for a number of reasons. And I'll show you some photos around how the map was actually used in Ebola and after the earthquake in Nepal. So here's a look at another town in Guinea. So this visualization is depicting just over a one-day period where 68 people mapped more than 20,000 buildings. So again, quite impressive. And like I talked about before, I've zoomed in here on sort of Central and Sub-Saharan Africa. You can see that the areas covered in red are projects sponsored by HOT or that HOT helped to coordinate. These are areas that have been mapped to some degree or another by our volunteers around the world. And so you can see huge amount of areas has been covered, but a lot of the areas in white have not yet been covered. So there's still a lot to do. A few visuals of how maps are actually used. So this is an image showing OpenStreetMap, a printed version of the map used in Nepal after the earthquake in 2015 by the Nepalese Armed Forces and Canadian military on the ground. This is USAID using a printed map based on OpenStreetMap to respond after the earthquake in Nepal. And again, this is a printed map used by Canadian disaster response team on the ground in Nepal. All of these are based on OpenStreetMap. So the point here is that OpenStreetMap has really become the de facto map for disaster response. And the data in OpenStreetMap is largely contributed by volunteers, many of whom are working together at Mapathons and mapping events. So one thing that's really important to talk about is that we're not only responding after a disaster, we're working to fill in all those gaps that you saw on the map that were colored in white before disasters happen. And we do that through a partnership that we call Missing Maps. So Missing Maps aims to get the places that are most vulnerable to natural disaster, but are also the least mapped. We aim to get those filled in before disasters and crises happen. And the way we do that is Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team works with a number of partners who helped found Missing Maps, including the American Red Cross, British Red Cross, MSF, and others who have now joined. And we're all using OpenStreetMap and promoting the use of OpenStreetMap to help map these areas. We're all working in different places, but we share a common vision around the need for better data and better information in areas that are vulnerable to disaster. And before I turn it over, I want to talk about the importance of young people in all these processes. So HOT really places an emphasis on training and building the capacity of people to map their own communities. And a big part of that is young people. So in almost all of our projects around the world, we partner with local universities and help train students at those universities to map the places they live. And many times the students we're working with are even younger than university age. So you can see sort of on the left side of my screen here, this is a photo from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, where we have very young students who are actually helping to operate drones. So on the right side, you could see those are, you see the sort of the yellow line that people are, there's a few folks in the front of the photo that are holding something that's a few feet wide. That's actually a drone or an unmanned aerial vehicle, and those are flown by some of our volunteers in Dar es Salaam to capture high resolution imagery, and that imagery is then used to create better maps. And so all of this is done through the power of volunteers, and many of them at a very young age. And this is a very recent example from the earthquake in Ecuador several weeks ago. We had students even in Ecuador who were working, and you can see the proof of this. You can see OpenStreetMap up on their screens. They were working to actually map their own country, which is really spectacular. And I think is just a testament to what young people can contribute. And what we often say is anyone who can use a web browser can help out. And that's anyone from, you know, it could be a 7-year-old or a 70-year-old, really, that's with a little bit of basic training, everyone can help out. And so I'd like to, you know, put forth a challenge to all of you to think creatively around how we can involve students and young people in our activities, not only as a way for them to learn, but as a way for them to give back and contribute to these global efforts. So thank you. You're all hot. You're all part of our community, and I'll now turn it over to. I'm not sure who's next. Is Marco next?
Aldo, here I am.
Aldo's next. Okay, great.
Okay. So you can see my screen now. Okay, fantastic. So, excuse me, we had to change to swap between my presentation and Marco's presentation because I am teaching in a course here in Sorrento in the south of Italy, and I have 20 people waiting for me, so I want to do my part now. Okay, someone has the microphone open and I have a return. Okay, so I want to explain you how we did the first mini Mapathon experiment. You can hear me? Something wrong? Okay. And the first mini Mapathon experiment in Como and then in Lombardy. I started to collaborate with Maria and Marco, going to a Mapathon for not young people, but students of our polytechnic, our university, and I fell in love with this kind of activity. And I spoke to Maria and Marco, and we decided to put together our expertise of our two labs in the Politecnico, trying to let children from schools to experiment the activity of the Mapathon. So we enrolled. We tried to do two editions of this mini Mapathon. The first one, very experimental, in Como campus, the campus managed by Maria, so it was easy. And we contacted two classes of an elementary school near Como. And the contact point was a former teacher, now retired, who collaborates with our lab, OCLAB, in the field of education technology. And I wrote an email to Laura, that former teacher, and I just told her I have an activity that I think can be very useful for you, for students of 10 years old, and if you want, we can try. And she answered enthusiastically, and so we had the first experiment with two classes, and it went very well, as you can see, and as I will show you in a minute. And so 36 pupils from one school to two classes. And then we tried another experiment with more children involved. And I sent just an email to our alumni, because our lab manage a master for education technology, and all the students of our master are teacher on the job. So I just wrote an email on Friday evening, and I left my office. Then when I arrived at home, I had a look at the reservation for this event, and it was overbooked. So I had to stop in half an hour. A lot of teachers told us, I want to participate in the mini Mapathon. Just having some basics information about it. Just it's a geographical activity. It involves technologies, and they were really. It has a humanitarian goal, and immediately the motivation of the teacher arises. So in the second experiment, we had 9 classes, 10 or 11 years old pupils from 6 schools, and in total 212 pupils, so a lot of pupils. in 2 rooms, in 2 computer rooms in Politecnico in Milano Bovisa. What we do with them, what we did with them, we described the activity in a frontal lesson, but very short. We tried to explain them in a very short way. And we strongly underlined the humanitarian goal, because our impression, our idea was that the humanitarian goal were really important for students. We had a coordination with the people from HOT and Missing Maps, and they prepared for us the right task, because for those kind of students, we decided just to let them to do buildings, not also the street. So we explained to the students the importance to be accurate. And this is very important from my point of view. Okay, I'm not an expert in geography. I am an expert in education technology and in pedagogy. And in my opinion, the very key of the success of the mini Mapathon experience is that it's a real project of authentic learning, because pupils feels the authenticity of this kind of experience. Absolutely. And so they work in couples, and so they can help each other and double check the results. We have created in advance the accounts, both for the sandbox and for the official OSM, and we gave it printed on paper. So when they arrived, they took a seat and they found a piece of printed paper with username and password, because we had not so much time. We programmed just 3 hours, and we wanted to let them mapping and not make an account, check the email and so on. So we wanted to go faster. So we created all the accounts for all the people. And as you know, they were very young. And so we gave our email to register the account. And now we have an amount of accounts that we can use for those kind of experiences. We decided to ask pupils, as I told you before, just to map buildings. It's more easy, and as you know, probably mapping the streets implies to classify, and it would be very, very difficult for young pupils, and with just 3 hours of time. The first passage was teaching them to use IDE editor. We decided to use IDE editor because it's very easy and it works directly on the web browser, so more easy. We teach them to use IDE editor in the sandbox to get familiar with the mapping experience. So this is the URL of the sandbox. They entered in the sandbox, and they had the possibility, for example, to map their own houses. We wanted to push the authenticity of this kind of project. So we said them, find your home and then try to map, okay? And then we started mapping. In that moment, the enthusiasm arises, literally explodes. And I think there was the right mix between cooperation and competition, because students started saying each other, I am mapping 5 buildings, 10 buildings, 20 buildings, and so on. So competition, but also when some people find difficulty, for example, checking if a building were a building or not, you know, the aerial photos are not so clear if you are not an expert. So they ask each other help, and me, Marco, and other people from the staff were there, so we could So there was the right mix between cooperation and competition at the end of the day. Then we gave every pupil a certificate of participation, and this is very important for them to engage them and to give them a sign of the participation in the Mapathon, and they were very excited about it. And we asked them to create a motto and a logo, and all the logos are available here if you want to check them, and they are very funny and very a very good representation of what about they understood of the Mapathon, and it's very significant in our opinion. And also the mottos are some poems, some composition, very clever. And okay, we gave a gift. A gift to the three mottos more funny, and the three logos more funny. And okay, they were involved in that way. We conducted a survey with the students, and we asked the teacher to carry out the survey the day after the Mapathon in their classes without us. We wanted the day after the Mapathon because we wanted they absorbed the experience, and the experience must be clear in mind but not over. And then we conducted semi-structured interviews with teacher. We want to understand the customer satisfaction of the pupils, but the most important things was if the pupils have acquired some educational benefit. And so talking with the teacher, we could understand what kind of educational benefit they gain. And of course, also the creation of a logo and a motto was very important. I want to show you, if I can, some result from the survey, and I try to share my desktop and to let you see the result of the survey. The majority of the pupils told us that they really learn something during the experience, and this is very important for us. And they learn a couple of things very interesting, because they learn that the map, the activity of the map is never done, and it's important that you have to map and then map and map and map, and that the map are created by people, and this is very important in my opinion. I want to show you the result. Okay. Okay. So we ask them your name, okay, your username using the software, the ID editor, and the most important things, do you learn something during the Mapathon? And the is yes, so very good. You learn to map, that map are important. I learned to map, I learned that there are places where maps are not existing, and this is very interesting. Helping people make me feel happy, and okay. I think the humanitarian point of view was very important for children, and what you learn and you didn't know before the Mapathon, that the ONG needs our work on the map, and that mapping is easy, funny, and useful, and then that mapping process is never finished. And how you can describe the Mapathon activity? This is useful, very good, funny, and passionating. So, and this is boring, just 3 people, and not useful, just 3 people. Difficult, so very good. What did you find difficult in this activity? And this part is identifying the buildings, and also for adult people is very difficult to understand if something on a map, on a photo, on the aerial photo is a building or not. So it's normal, and to draw the building in the right way, and to tag the building. What do you think about the ED editor? Quite easy or very easy? So the majority of the pupils found the activity very easy. And this is the most funny question, because we asked them, describe the Mapathon to a friend who didn't know anything about it, and helps to create maps, a very good vision of the activity we did together. So during the interview with the teacher, emerged that the subject geography had a very good impact thanks to the Mapathon, and geography is considered as a Cinderella between the subjects, and also there was effect in geometry, logic, and the most important thing, in my opinion, procedural skill, because you have to understand how to draw the buildings, and then be accurate, because it's a real work. So you have to do it with accuracy, and then you improve your execution speed, but you must come back and be accurate. And this kind of process, according to the teacher, is very, very important. And then there are motivational aspects about technologies, the use of technology, humanitarian issue, very important for pupils, relationship in the small group, because people were in the 2 children per computer, and they help each other, collaboration, and competition. More than one teacher told us also about an inclusion effect, because some students not so involved in the normal class activities, because of the ability of draw the buildings and to click in the right way and so on, find its dimension in this activity. In our opinion, for me as a pedagogist, this is a perfect instance of distributed TPAC, to use a famous definition by Punya Mishra. And in my opinion, as a pedagogist, there are 2 key points. Authentic learning, because this is an activity that involves real-world problems and that mimics the work of profession, and involves presentation of findings to the audience behind the classroom. And this is perfect, because the audience is the entire world. And then the distributed TPAC, because in this kind of activity, the different parts of the knowledge needed, content, pedagogy, and technology, flows between the people in the game, for example, teacher, pupils, us as experts, and so on. And this is very important, in my opinion. So the activity was very cool.